cloud that signifies the presence of God with them, reassuring them, leading them, guiding them. It's the same sort of cloud that in Ezekiel we see at the temple. That's God's glory in the cloud, His presence, His reassuring presence. And of course, in the Transfiguration, the cloud is there, God's presence again. And the cloud of our knowing, is one of the great texts of mystical theology, a 14th century English writer. And the cloud has always been a symbol of God's presence, God's reassuring presence. But we're in the cloud, we don't understand what's happening, but God is there. A final thing, two other little things to say rather, on this little passage. The bones of Joseph are brought home. Now that's really just to tell us all that this is the end of the Jewish people in Egypt. Joseph went down, and his brothers and everybody followed him, and now they're taking him home. That's sort of a closure to this whole episode in Jewish people's lives. And the final thing to say about this whole passage is there is a sense of worship about it. There is a sense that this is God's people, and God is so present to them. This is the worshipping liturgical community. And this is the community that's going to end up at the foot of Mount Sinai. Now, the Egyptians. That's Exodus 14, 1 to 14. The first part is more focused on the Egyptians and the effect that they have on the Israelites. So, we know that Pharaoh's heart is hardened. They follow him. They follow rather the Israelites. And then the Israelites see them. And they turn around and they are afraid and they cry to Yahweh for help. Now that's a typical call of faith. So Moses actually calls them to faith. And it's a beautiful phrase or two here. So I'll read it. Have no fear. Stand firm. And you will see what Yahweh will do to save you today. Yahweh will do the fighting for you. You have only to keep still. Now that is an extraordinary call to faith, to trust. Yahweh will act. Their hearts are full of fear, but the call is to trust. And we're going to see that at the closure of this episode, that's what happened. They have faith. They believe in Yahweh. Often in our lives, isn't it true that we're powerless and we're afraid? And so often, God's first word to us when we're afraid and powerless is, don't be afraid. Have no fear. That's the first word. The opposite of fear is faith. And we see it here so magnificently for us in this episode. Now, just a word too about the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. As I mentioned before, but it's worth saying again, it says in verse 17, I shall win myself glory at the expense of Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. And when I have won glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and his chariots and his army, the Egyptians will learn that I am Yahweh. Now this is where some of these modern atheists, have a field day of God wanting glory. Yay! All for me. But it's missing the point, because it's the priestly school writing. It's the priestly school that, of course, puts this into the mouth of Yahweh. And what it is the sense that God is the one to be adored. God is the one who has the power. And the word doxa, power, glory, is a difficult word to translate. It sort of means it's a weighty sort of a thing, but it's a precious weight. It's a magnificently beautiful weight, heavy weight. And it's that which calls forth in us a sense of wanting to give glory to God. We can't believe how magnificent God is, and we call that God's glory. So it's really to misread it, to have a sense that God's, I want the glory sort of stuff. It's what we can't help but give to God when we have a sense of the wonder of what God is doing in our lives, in our world, and so on. So, then the final thing in this passage of the crossing of the sea region I just wanted to say is the last little verse, and that is, Israel witnessed the great act that Yahweh had performed against the Egyptians, and the people venerated Yahweh. They put their faith in Yahweh and in Moses his servant. So after all, Moses calls them to faith, and they have faith. They believe, and they are saved. And chapter 15 then is that powerful doxology, that hymn of victory, and we're exuberant. Once we've been saved, once we have a sense that we're saved, we're joyful. I don't mean in the fundamentalist sense of being saved, but concretely, after we've lived by faith and something has happened for us, we know it's happened, we can't help but have a sense of joy within us, a sense of exuberance almost at times. That's why there's dancing in this as well. We're free. We don't worry as much. Faith liberates us. Yahweh is the God of my salvation, and I sing. I am free. And of course, Yahweh is the only one I'll bow to. I won't bow to Johnny Howard or Kevin Rudd or anybody. It's Yahweh. So, just by way of conclusion now, the fourth little thing for today. The Exodus event gives us an extraordinary, new and revolutionary understanding of what God is like. God is always on the side of those who are oppressed in any way. And when they cry out to him, God surely hears their cry. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that God in some way acts. God in some way does something by way of liberating. God ultimately comes to us as liberating, as the liberator. True faith always has a tremendous sense of freedom. We're free of anxiety, free of worry. We're free of whatever oppressed us. And finally, we have a new sense then that we want everybody to experience this. We want society to be free. We want a society where nobody is a slave, nobody is oppressed, because God is the God of salvation, of freedom, of liberation. So this is a powerful, really powerful symbol, more than a symbol. This is what life's really about. And so that's why this whole part of Exodus has been so mightily powerful in all the liberation events through history, and especially in our own day. And finally, we've closed now the first part of the book of Exodus. The next big, massive material is going to be at the foot of Mount Sinai. And in between, we have what we call our travel music, which is the wilderness narrative. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.